Hello, so in this video we're going to look at the specific problem, cosine of negative 105 degrees. And the idea is we're going to work with angles that we know. So let's just take the first quadrant, right? And we know here's 0, 30, 45 degrees, 60, and then 90. And then of course we know all the multiples, but they're just repetitive, right? Going all around the circle. So these are the standard angles you should know and have well in your memory. And essentially, if I want to find negative 105 degrees, what I want to do is see what combination of these angles would get me there, right? Because what I want to do is use, in this case, the cosine of either the addition of the sum of two angles or the difference of two angles. And then once I get these to either add or subtract negative 105 degrees, then I'll go ahead and apply the formula. So let's take a look. So the idea is this, you know, if I take any two angles, I could say, well, 90 degrees minus 60 degrees is going to give me 30 degrees. Or I could do 90 degrees plus 60 degrees, right? And I get 150 degrees. Or I could do 60 degrees plus 45 degrees, and I'd get, what, 105 degrees. That looks like what we want, but we want them both to be negative. But I just kind of want to go through it and just show you, like if I did 60 degrees minus 45 degrees, I'd get what? 15 degrees. And so on and so forth, right? Then I can look at the difference between 45 and 30, which also, by the way, would give me 15, right? Or I could add them and get 75, and so on and so forth. So in our case, what we want to do is, it looks like we want to do cosine of negative 105 degrees would be the same thing as cosine of negative 60 degrees plus negative 40 degrees, right? And then that would give it to me. So I'm like, okay, at least I've got, did I say, I meant 45 degrees, my apologies. Oops. All right, so now I apply the formula, right? And basically when I'm adding two angles, it doesn't matter that the angles are negative, I'm adding them. And the formula says, when I'm adding a cosine of two angles, I do cosine of the first angle times cosine of the second angle minus sine of the first angle times sine of the second angle. All right, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to follow that formula. So what I'm going to have is cosine of the first angle, cosine of the second angle, and then because it's a plus, it becomes a minus here, and then sine of the first angle times sine of the second angle. Okay? Now I can use my even, odd things, formulas. You know, cosine of a negative 60 is also the same thing as cosine positive 60. Or I could just think, well, okay, if I go in the negative direction, I'm here at negative 60 degrees. I would go over in the x, I'm in quadrant 4. I go over in the x, positive, what, a half. So I could do it either way. Whichever way you want to do it, it's fine. So let's go ahead and use the even odd, just because it's extra practice. So cosine of a negative angle is the same thing as cosine of the positive angle. So I'd have here. And then minus sine of a negative angle is the negative of the sine of the positive angle. Right? That's the odd function. So this would be negative sine 45 degrees. Now, I don't know about you, I get confused with a lot of negative signs. So one thing I'd want to do is kind of clean this up and go rewrite it. And I have a negative times a negative times a negative, right? So that's three negatives. So it's totally, so now it's all these three together are going to be negative. And now I can just write sine of 60, sine of 45 degrees. So now they're in positive degrees. It's easier probably. Let me go ahead and rewrite this up here. So cosine of 60, cosine of 45, minus sine of 60, sine of 45, okay? And now we're going to go ahead and plug these values in. So cosine of 60, remember, what I'm thinking is on the unit circle, it's this x-coordinate over a little, up a bunch. So I have a half, and then cosine of 45 is square root 2 over 2. then carry the minus sign. Sine of 60, so at 60 degrees, I go over a little in the x, up a lot in the y, so that's square root 3 over 2. And then sine of 45 is square root 2 over 2. Okay, and now I do the arithmetic. So 1 times square root 2 is square root 2 over 4 minus square root 3 times square root 2 is square root 6 over 4. And I can basically just put them over the same denominator, right? But I can't subtract them because they're not the same value, right? They're not, it's like saying x minus y, can't subtract them. So here you go. There is your final answer. Thanks so much for listening.